Welcome to Expedition Networking, a special segment of the Networking RX podcast. I'm Frank Agan, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections and your host for this program. For those of you who are familiar, on the Networking RX podcast, we share information and have conversations with experts, such as authors, researchers, and social scientists. And all of these programs are aimed at helping you learn how to become better at building professional relationships and understanding why they work. In this Expedition Networking segment, however, we're going to bring on successful entrepreneurs and unique professionals and explore their networking adventure and learn how they used relationships to create lasting success. Today on Expedition Networking, we have Sandy Stosz, Admiral Sandy Stosz. She is I'm going to let her tell her story, but she's the author of a book called Breaking Ice, Breaking Glass, Leading in Uncharted Waters, which was published on June 1st and is out. But she has a remarkable 40-year career in the United States Coast Guard, the other armed services that we tend to forget about unless you live on a coast or one of the Great Lakes. You don't really hear about the Coast Guard, but they do quite a bit. So, Sandy, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Frank. Thank you very much for having me on today.
All right, 40 years in the Coast Guard. How did this start? How did it, most people, it's like 20 years and they're done. I shouldn't say most people. That's really good, 20 years. 40 years, did you lose a bet, I guess? Now, I want to hear the story, is that how this all started and...
Well, I tell you what, Frank, if you want to hear the whole story, you've got to buy the book, Breaking Ice and Breaking Glass, Leading in Uncharted Waters, because it takes 300 pages to tell just a portion of it. But I'll start out with a focus on the relationships and networking, which is the heart of this podcast. And if I look at how I ended up going for 40 years when I went to the Coast Guard Academy, entering in 1978 as a cadet or student up in New London, Connecticut, graduated 4 years later in 1982, and stayed on for that entire career from cadet to admiral. A lot of it was just reaching out my hand for relationship building, for networking help, to learn from others, or reaching my hand down to recognize that someone else needed that relationship, that network, to build their ability to advance. Because I wanted, once I started to advance up, I had learned that so I shouldn't use a trite quote, but no man or no woman is an island. But when I was young, I was an introvert, shy young girl, and I stuck to individual sports. I was too shy to do team sports, afraid to put myself out there. And I did things individually. When I joined the Coast Guard Academy as one of the first women to enter, once the ice was broken, so to speak, and Congress required the service academies to open their doors to women, I was put into an environment where now it was all about the team and all about peer relationships. So I believe I succeeded by first building a network of peer relationships. So I had allies, because you need allies when you're in a situation where you're cold, wet, hungry, tired, scared, and maybe all those at once. You need people who you can look left and look right and depend upon. Then as you get a little more senior and you start to figure things out, whatever you might be doing, whether you're a student like I was, or whether you're a new employee in a job, you start to look at how you can look up and reach for building relationships with others who can give you knowledge and help you to develop into the leader you need to be to advance. And then you start looking down and reaching your hand out down to help others advance up to come behind you. So in a nutshell, there's a little bit about my career and why I was able to stay in. It was all about those relationships, the lateral relationships with peers, building allies, and then looking up for help and looking down to move the next people up. So you created a virtuous cycle of advancement and succession management in the Coast Guard.
Interesting. Now, when you were in high school, did you know all along you wanted to go into the Coast Guard Academy, or?
No, because it wasn't an option. So in 1976, I was a junior in high school and I was living in Ellicott City, Maryland. My neighbor, who knew I was a tomboy, I was born and raised with 3 brothers. So I was always out playing football with the boys and their friends. And she brought over an article in the Baltimore Sun that was telling all about how the a naval academy in Annapolis had to open its doors to women like all the other service academies. And it did a feature article. And I read that article very excitedly, thinking, wow, a new opportunity. And I was always one, even though I was shy, to be intrigued by doing something different, not just the same old thing. But I yet lacked a little confidence for that, maybe. So I applied to the Naval Academy, and you had to have the nomination from your senator. And I had help getting that from networking.
Yeah.
To find my mom knew somebody at the club that we belonged to for swimming that knew a retired senator from Maryland who connected me with a sitting senator, and I got my interview. But then my guidance counselor was taking care of me, and he was my swimming coach at that same pool. So you can see how this is all connected.
Yeah.
And my swimming coach, PJ, the guidance counselor, said, Sandy, you need to cast a wider net than just the Naval Academy. You can't put all your eggs in one basket. He says, look, I got a flyer in the mail from a thing called the Coast Guard Academy in New London, Connecticut. So we poured over that flyer and between us decided it was a small Navy, which Coast Guard is not a small Navy. Although we do have ships, big ships in the South China Sea, and we have patrol boats in the Persian Gulf. We're not a small Navy, but I went to the Coast Guard Academy, to make a long story short, and it was an opportunity that hadn't existed when I was newly a freshman in high school. But I was one to want to seize that opportunity and then make connections to achieve my goals and get into that academy.
I guess I'm curious with respect to, and this gets into gender roles or gender, connectivity, because you're in the Coast Guard and you're one of the first women in the Coast Guard. I don't know how many women were in the class you were in, but I guess let me share an analogy. When I went off to college, and I'm just a couple years behind you, I was keenly listening to the upperclassmen about the classes to take, the classes not to take, who had the books, what books you needed to buy, what books you didn't need to buy, so on and so forth. Was there a hindrance because there weren't as many women?
That's a really good question. And it's funny. I was just reading a little piece in the personal section of the Wall Street Journal this morning about women in the workplace and how sometimes they can feel like competitors because there are fewer of them. And this particular piece talked about two Black women who kind of felt like they were maybe competing. And so they had a little bit of this feeling of maybe imposter syndrome to start with. Anyway, I think it was harder 40 years ago. Women were more competitive. Sometimes you weren't necessarily going to have your allyship. You couldn't guarantee because there was a woman cadet who was senior to you, they'd be looking out for you. Now, I had some of the best mentors in my life, two upper class women, Michelle Fitzpatrick and Karen Tweed, were responsible for my training during the summer. And they were wonderful mentors and role models for me, helped me to succeed as a cadet, but other women weren't. And then some of the men were good mentors and some of the men weren't. I argue that it's not about gender and that you don't necessarily have to go to somebody who looks like you to get networked or mentored. You need to go to somebody you can trust and respect, who can advise you and help you to grow regardless of their race, gender, or ethnicity.
No, I think that's probably that's a very fair response. And I don't know, it's just, for me, it was my football buddies, guys who played football, because they, it was a team, like, much like being in the Coast Guard, it was kind of a team, and you just figure, okay, I can trust these people. But you did have other cadets who were men, and you just, I guess you had no other choice, because you couldn't look at somebody who there was. When you entered, there was no woman who had 40 years in. There was no women admiral. I mean, what's the title of your book? Breaking Ice. You truly broke the ice. Kind of had to figure it out.
Yeah, but look, everybody does. So look at Neil Armstrong and NASA. If they had said there's never been a man on the moon, we can't go here because it's impossible. We can't look up and see a man on the moon. We'd have never
Right.
gone to space exploration. So I've always argued that there are, well, I can't say I always argued because I've learned over time. I think wisdom comes with experience, that you make your own fate, you make your own choices, and you're limited only by, well, you're limited by a lot of things, but look at tackling the things you're self-limiting on first. So people often want to tackle the institution. Oh, the barriers, I can't get through. Well, what are you doing about creating your own strengths and feeling comfortable in that workplace and looking for allies and mentors? And that way the barriers, you can go around them, you can go through them. But if you just don't even address your own ability to seek these relationships, to network, and to work around things, then you are going to be stuck. But I think it's on the individual first and foremost to create their own fate. And certainly it's on people that are more senior in the organization to reach down and provide policies and laws that help people to break through institutional barriers, or for senior bosses to reach down and pull younger people up. But you got to be responsible for your own outcomes too.
Yeah. Well, you had indicated you were kind of an introvert, tomboy introvert, which is fine. I mean, that's entirely possible, or well, it is possible. That was you. At what point did you realize that you had to kind of be outside yourself to make a go of this? I'm somewhat of an introvert, and you kind of operate, and then there was a point in my life where I realized, what, I can't do this alone. I can't do this alone. I'm going to be so much more effective. And I think we all have that epiphany at some point.
I did. I had that epiphany when I was in high school. All the way up through high school, I was able to get by myself, studying really hard.
Yeah.
I was in individual sports. I threw the shot put and discus on track team. So I just was me, in the ring. It was when I went to the academy and joined the Coast Guard, where everything is about the team, and you're only as strong as the weakest link in the chain. So you can't afford to have any weak links. So the strong people in the team reach down and mentor and pull up the weaker people so that they can all be that team that can succeed. So it was in the Coast Guard. And then that carried through for the 40 years. I learned the power of a few people or a team over just the individual, which was hard. It's hard to accept that, because people who are smart and who are good at things, you've seen those people who walk into the room and they're the smartest person in the room, but sometimes they will fail because they need the different perspectives that come from a team with different experiences, different personalities, different ways of thinking. And so I think I know it was in the Coast Guard that I first really understood the value of a team, and then started to really lean in on that and use those teams. And certainly whenever you command a ship, like I did, I was a surface operator, 12 years at sea. I was one person out of dozens or hundreds on the ship. And even though I might have been senior and the captain of some of those ships, the ship would never get underway to do its mission without the entire team of the crew pulling together on the lines, like the proverbial pulling on a line to raise the sail in the old days.
Yeah.
That's how you operate in the Coast Guard.
When you first started out and kind of, okay, I've got to work with this team, was there some apprehension about, because it's something you hadn't done? I threw the shot put, I threw the discus. I mean, it is very individual. You hardly have a coach, right? Here's a bucket with discus and the shot in it. Go practice, right? That was pretty much it. There may be 3 or 4 other people with you, and that was it. I guess, was there some apprehension about, okay, this is supposed to work? It's kind of like the trust fall, right? The first time you do that, it's trust, it's faith.
Well, and the first time you do it happens over and over and over again in the Coast Guard. And when I say the Coast Guard, for your audience, the military, every branch is similar. We have different missions and core values, but similar functions. So it happened over and over. So I'll give you an example to answer that question. When I was a lieutenant, which is a mid-grade officer, I'd been in the Coast Guard 8 years. I was assigned as the commanding officer or captain of a icebreaker up in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. And I'd already been at sea 6 years. I'd had 4 duty assignments by then. And I reported up to this ship, and it's starting all over. Every 2 years you rotate, and you've got to overcome apprehension. You don't know anybody. The longer you are in the Coast Guard, you know more people wherever you're assigned. So that becomes less of an issue.
Right.
And I reported to this ship, and my boss, who was the supervisor of all the Coast Guard units in that geographic area, I was the first woman to ever report aboard to command any vessel on the Great Lakes, any of the Great Lakes. This was up in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, on Lake Superior with the St. Mary's River. And so this was 1990. He didn't think women could command a ship. It just wasn't in his paradigm to recognize that. So he took one look at me, and I had come from a job where I was the military aide to this service secretary. It was the Secretary of Transportation at the time, Mr. Sam Skinner. And he said, "You're just the secretary's fair-haired golden girl. We'll see how long you last." And he proceeded to make my life miserable. And I was in the spotlight, the first woman to ever report, all-male crew on this icebreaker. But you know what? That crew stood up for me. And I made it my mission to build trust and earn respect of my crew. And I just thought, I'm going to do my best. And I did everything I could to, and I won't go into all those details, they're in the book. But eventually one of my people, a chief bosun mate who was the deck force department head, went up to the captain's office and shut the door and said, "Captain, you've got to back off our captain, our commanding officer. She's doing a good job. And you're just creating confusion in the crew because we do something good. And then we're seeing that the captain's getting banged on, put down." And amazingly, the captain backed off. So this junior person who was an enlisted man stood up for me as an ally, went in and did something that I didn't do for myself because I didn't necessarily have the confidence. I just got tunnel vision, and I got into that zone that you see people get into where they don't see a way out, but it may be right in front of them. They might just have to go up and sit down with their boss and talk it out. I didn't do that. I just suffered in silence, whereas my people stood up for me. So it goes to that relationships I built with my crew. Yeah. But I sort of failed in not building a relationship with my captain because he kind of squashed me down real fast, and I stayed under that stone. I should have dug out and gone and talked to him. So I learned a lot from that.
Well, I mean, I guess my reaction to that is I kind of get where you're coming from, because he's coming at you with a very antagonistic approach. And I think our natural response there is to be defensive, right? I've just got to hunker down and do a good job, going to him. I'm putting myself in your shoes. Going to him would have been almost an admission of weakness. But I think it's very courageous of your
bosun mate.
Bosun mate, yeah, going there and advocating on your behalf. In my mind, that's much more powerful, because it's that third party validation. Right. I see something you don't see.
Right, Frank, you're right about that. And so, how much better could the office environment be today if we looked to be allies of somebody else without having to be asked? Especially, like I said, peer to peer. This happened to be a subordinate, but he was a enlisted man who was my same age, just a different station in life. He was enlisted, I was an officer. But develop allies, develop those relationships, and in pre-need relationships. So build trust and earn respect. And then when you need help, there's going to be allies that you've cultivated that are going to support you when you need it most, when it is more awkward to try to speak for yourself and toot your own horn.
Yeah. Well, let's shift gears. Let's talk about Sandy. Let's talk about the book. Let's talk about the speaking you're out there doing. And so I'll throw it at you. And, I don't want you to give the book away, obviously, but, some of the, what you talk about in the book and the types of things you're looking to do and ways of getting out and, and talking to groups and companies and so on and so forth?
Well, that's a loaded question because it's another thing I could spend an hour talking about. But I wanted to write this book from the time that I was serving as that aide to the service secretary. And I could see the government from the top of a cabinet level organization looking down, so to speak. I could see the Coast Guard, where it fit amongst the myriad of other agencies. And I turned to one of my colleagues in that job, and I was like this lieutenant, like I was talking about earlier, only 8 years in. I said to my colleague, Shane, I said, Shane, I want to write a book someday. Look at all the experience that we're having here. Look at all the leadership the Coast Guard has taught me. I want to write a book someday and give back leadership lessons learned. And Shane looked at me and said, Sandy, you could have called that book Breaking Ice and Breaking Glass. Because she knew I'd been on icebreakers my first part of my career. My first 3 years were icebreakers. I was getting orders to another icebreaker. She knew I was one of the first women to come out of the academy and therefore always the first. So sure enough, I retired 30 years later after 40 years with the Coast Guard and wrote this book to give back leadership lessons. And I do it through stories and experiences, a little bit of which you've heard on this show. And the goal is to help, well, I guess to be that ally for people who are looking to be successful at all levels of their career. And these are lessons that I think will help them do that. A lot of them go to building trust, earning respect, creating relationships. I've got tidbits, frameworks, models for success in there that derive from stories. So it's my feedback. I'm really happy that feedback from people who've read the book is that it's an interesting read, that they love the story. So it's not just a leadership book that says, here's how you should do it.
Right.
And I have been doing podcasts like this, which I love the interaction of an interview. I've been doing some radio interviews, articles in the news. We just had one from Sault Ste. Marie Evening News, just published an article on me this weekend. And that's where my ship had been, the Katmai Bay, that I told a story about. And I'm doing some speaking. And so there's 3 ways I'm trying to give back after the 40 years the Coast Guard gave me. The book, the talks and that I just talked about with the media. And then the third thing is my blog. I've got a weekly blog called Leading with Character, and it tries to give a lesson every week that will hopefully help people to become those leaders of character who can succeed at every level.
Can people get to your blog through your website?
Yes, my website is www.sandrastosz.com. And I've got the blog, I've got the ways to order the book, and the book, it's not just Amazon. The book can be ordered through your favorite local bookstore if you want to support bookstores. I've got buttons for all that. And they might just order it. They probably aren't going to have it in stock, but you can support local bookstores. And my news and media, all that's on the website. So I encourage you to go there if you want to learn more about leading with character.
And for our listeners, I'll put the website in the show notes. But if you're not prone to that, Stosz is Sandra's, just like it sounds. Stosz is STOS, Z is in zebra. But like I said, I'll put that in the show notes. Retired Admiral Sandy Stosz, author of Breaking Ice, Breaking Glass, Leading in Uncharted Waters. Sandy, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Frank. I really enjoyed talking about networking and relationships.
To wrap things up, remember, we're looking for some enterprising business types to join our team as franchisees of AmSpirit Business Connections. Our franchisees work with entrepreneurs, sales representatives, and professionals in their area to help them become more successful through networking and the exchange of quality business referrals in a structured weekly morning meeting. This is a unique franchise opportunity, you see, because these meetings are in the morning. A successful business type or professional can add this franchise opportunity onto what they're already doing. Again, all of our franchisees do something else. For a couple hours in the morning, a few mornings a week, these franchisees work the AmSpirit Business Connections model. The rest of the time, they're attorneys, accountants, realtors, coaches, and consultants of various kinds. The wonderful thing is that not only do our franchisees realize a financial gain from operating the AmSpirit Business Connections model, but the business networks that they build and develop become a great source of referrals for their primary business as well. Perhaps you know someone, perhaps you are that someone. Whatever the case, to learn more about the AmSpirit Business Connections franchise opportunity, please contact me using the email in the show notes or the one we provide at the end of this program.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.